Tonight, we're going to talk about Western Sydney 70.3 for 2024. I'm going to be talking about the logistics of race day. So for all the first timers that haven't done this before, I'll talk about, what sort of happens on race day, how transitions work, all that sort of stuff before we start. Sorry, I'm still admitting people. And then I'm also going to go through things like how you, from a strategy perspective, how to approach pacing, as well as tips and bits and pieces to do the event as well. So I'm quite happy for people to ask questions as we go along. So if you've got a question as we go, don't need to wait till the end. I'm happy for you guys to ask straight away. All right, so kicking straight into the event. So the first thing I would say, if it's your first time doing a 70.3, is don't go in there with any sort of expectations of how this is going to go. So most people will say, oh, look, I want to do 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. I want to break this time. I'd say that's the wrong way to go about it. You should be going into these events with the only goal to finish, but have the goal of doing the process really, really well. So what I mean by that is you should be going out there with a plan of this is what I'm going to do in the swim, this is what I'm going to do on the bike, and this is what I'm going to do on the run. All right. If you follow that process to the best of your ability, you're going to get the best time that you can get. Okay. And that should be the way that you look at it. After the race, you can finish and go, you know what, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. And that might have been things that you could have done during the race better. It could have been things that you go, you know what, in training, I should have done this or I should have prepared for that. And you can go away and then you can go at it again. But the best way to approach the race is to not go out there saying, I need to run 5-minute K pace or I need to bike in under 3 hours. That won't help you. You need to go out there with a process, follow the process to the best of your ability, and the time is the outcome that you'll get from that one. The other reason that I'll say that is there's also things that can happen that are outside of your control. So, it can be really windy, it might rain, it might be 30 odd degrees. All of these things will affect your outcome, which is your time, but they won't change how you do your process, which is what you're doing when you're actually out there on race day. So the logistics of the race. So I'll go through all of this just one at a time. So for the first timers, you all should have got, obviously you're all registered. You should have got an email at some point where you had to book in your registration. So most of you will register your bike the day before. So when you go there the day before, you'll register. They will give you your pack of stickers and bits and pieces to pop on your bike. Or did they mail those out to you guys? Did you pick them up on race day or did they mail them out?
Pick them up.
No one's got those yet?
Pick them up on race day. Oh, the day before.
Yep. So when you get there, they'll give you all that stuff the day before, and I'll go through what will be in that pack when you get that. Your goal will be to take all your bike down the day before the race. You'll rack it up. You'll set the vast majority of your stuff up the day before. You'll then go back home, and then you'll come on race day and just put the final bits and pieces in. So the stuff that you'll do on the actual morning of the race of popping your drink bottles on, I probably wouldn't do things like leave your bike computers and stuff there. You're going to do that the next day when you come in. So that's what happens the day before the race. So I'll actually go through to the next slide because I'm just going to show you what you guys can pick up on race day.
Just on that, when they rack the bike up the day before, when you say gear, so would you leave, your shoes, your transitional stuff, or just the bike?
I would just leave your bike.
Okay.
You don't want to leave too much gear there because for all you know, it's going to rain overnight. So normally you would just leave your bike there. I don't actually think you can leave your shoes there anyway overnight. Basically, you just pop your bike in because it just makes it a little bit less hectic on race day. So a couple of things when you rack your bike up, rack it up. The next morning, you're going to go inflate your tires. You're going to go set up your cycling shoes. You'll go set up your run shoes. You put your drink bottles and stuff on race morning. You're pretty much just collecting this kit that you can see in front of you. And then you're just going to literally leave your bike there. So the stuff that you'll get in the kit when you're there is you'll get anything from, your tattoos that you got to put on your arms. But you'll also get stuff like this, which is the stickers that need to go on your bike. So that the photographers know who you are and also the drafting police know who you are as well. But this is all the stuff that you'll pick up the day before and take with you. So when you go pick that up, there's a couple of things there's only really one thing you need to pop on your bike, which is this sticker. And that will go on your seat post, okay, and hang off the back. But that's all you really need to set up the day before when you're there. The rest of it you'll just take home with you, okay? All right. On race day, gates for the race, for the venue will open around about 4:30 in the morning. Okay, so you guys don't start your race until 7:15, or the pros go off at 7:15 in the morning. So you'll have a fair bit of time in the morning if you want to. I would encourage you all to go and get there at least 90 minutes before the race start. the reason I say that is because you need to park. Just be aware that you are going to park in the car park across the road or on the other side of the regatta centre, and you're going to have to walk across. And for most of you, that's going to be a decent 1 to 1.5K walk to get across there. So the walk alone is going to take you 15 minutes to get there. I always encourage people to get there early, just so in case something's gone wrong, you've got time to fix it. And I think it's always better not to be rushing on race morning. It's better to come in, put all your stuff with your bike, walk out, find your friends and training buddies and just hang out. And it should be a lot less stressful that way in terms of what you're doing. But if you get to your bike and you discover for some reason there's a flat tire or something, if you got 90 minutes to spare, you can go get those things fixed in time on race morning. Or for some reason you forgot to grab something out of the car, you forgot your drink bottle, you got enough time to go back to the car and go get all those things. So I would encourage you to get there earlier on race day. One, because it's easier to park. Two, it gives you more time to actually get out there and set up all your gear and bits and pieces. The way the wave start will work on the day, so you'll rack all your stuff up. At some point, they'll say transition is closed. My guess is that's probably going to be about 10 to 7 in the morning, and they'll get everyone out of transition, and they'll start corralling you across to the water side. You all have different cap colors. So there's 4 different cap colors based on whatever swim time you predicted for yourself on there. You will line up roughly in order of cap color. Okay, so the faster caps will go up the front, and then you'll filter through. It's a bit of a merging. It's not a hard line of purple starts here and then green starts. You'll just see it's a bit of a merging for that. So when you get to that point, basically head down towards the water and just sort of start ordering yourself up in terms of cap color and get ready to go down. What you'll find is, there's a big, long rolling start. So it takes quite a while to get down to the water to get started if you're one of the back groups. So be prepared to be there for, potentially half an hour waiting to watch all the people go in front of you before you go. A couple of things to just be aware of, before the race, and I'll touch on these quickly, is just know the course. I know that sounds silly, but say the swim course, just be really familiar with where you actually have to swim. It's really well marked out on the day, but it's always good if you actually know in the course, little things like, know exactly where you go on the bike course, right? So even, the day before, go drive it and see what everything looks like. So you know where the turnaround points are. You shouldn't be able to get lost, but it is possible. And every now and again, a volunteer is a volunteer and they will direct you the wrong way. It should all be fairly straightforward, but it's really up to you guys to know what the course is when you're out there. And the same for the run. Just be aware of the course. Go, okay, there's a hill there, there's this here, there's that there. It's always really good to be familiar with it. And that's all the stuff that I would recommend that you do, the day before the race as well. The other one is just be aware of the rules and regulations. So there is drafting rules, so you can't ride directly behind someone when you're there, and just be aware of little rules like how long you're allowed to take to overtake someone as well. So the likelihood of getting stuck with those sorts of rules is low, but when you've got a busy event like this one, especially in the opening sort of hour on the bike, there's a lot of people congregated together, and if you hear the motorcycle coming from behind, just make sure you're not accidentally riding next to someone or accidentally riding too close to someone. So just be aware of the rules before you get there on race day. Okay. Has anyone got any questions about race morning before I sort of move on? The only other thing that I'd probably mention in getting ready early is if you need to use the portaloos, go early, because there's like 1,000 really nervous people there. And so if you need the portaloo, just make sure you aim to go earlier, because if you go later, one, the queue might be really long. But you might also find that the condition of toilets is not so great. All right. I'm not super good on technology, but I've got Thomas and Hamza have raised their hands. So does that mean you guys have questions?
Yeah, hi. I just
Thomas,
had a
have a question?
question. Yeah, just a question. They talk about a timing chip as if it's something different. What's the timing chip?
The timing chip is a timing chip. So they'll give you a little chip, and they'll give you like a strap that goes around your ankle. So basically you'll wrap that around your ankle before the race, and then that times everything that you do, so that when you walk across the start line, it'll go off and it'll say Thomas has started the race. And then when you get out of the water, there'll be a timing mat there and it'll say Thomas has finished this one. And then there'll be various points on the bike leg that you go over a timing mat and it'll say, Thomas has reached kilometer 30. Now he's reached 60. Now he's reached this point. And so that's what they're actually using to track you online, but also just to make sure you actually do the right number of laps as well. But you'll get that in your kit when you register on the Saturday.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Hamza,
none
what was
of
your
the
question?
numbers that we're wearing have a
Sorry?
timing chip in it.
Sorry, say that again.
So all of the numbers, the race numbers, they don't have the timing chip in it. It's on the ankle.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
The realistic is the numbers that you put on either around your waist for the run or on the bike are realistically just for the photographers, so that you automatically are allocated your photos at the end, so you can go buy your paraphernalia afterwards. But also, if you get in trouble from the drafting police, they'll call out your number and say number 651. You have got your 3-minute penalty, and you got to sit in the box for 3 minutes. That's what the markers on your bike are for. All right, Hamza, what was your question?
Yeah, just on the race day, in terms of breakfast, how early are you having your breakfast, and like what would you recommend for breakfast?
Yep, I'll get to nutrition a little bit later on, but I'll get to that one later on. I've got another slide later on, so rather than jump around, I'll wait till we get to that one. There. All right, so a couple of things that I'd recommend everyone do before race day. Number one, I always tell everyone to just get really, really, really organized. Okay, so what I mean by that is I would encourage you, even this weekend, which is a week out, after you've done your final training sessions on Saturday, Sunday, whenever you're doing, hopefully you're all doing very little next week and tapering down, but I'd encourage you to go pack all your gear up. Okay, and so what I would always say is go get all your gear, pop it out onto the table, and then just go through the race step by step in your head. Okay, make sure you've got everything you need. Put your goggles, your swim cap, your tri-suit, your race belt, your everything, your socks. And then once you've put it all out there and you go through the race in your head, pack it away as you go. Okay. And then once you've packed it into your bag, you can go put that bag aside and you don't need to think about the race, okay, until the night before when you go check it again. But once you've got it all packed away, you can go, I've sat down, I've done that, I've got everything there, I don't need to worry about it. Okay. I'd really encourage you to do that. And then that also gives you a week to go find anything that you didn't realize was broken or missing, or maybe you got a race belt and you've lost it, or you can't find your elastic laces or something. It gives you time to kind of do that one. The other little things to do are just little stuff. Make sure all the batteries on your bike are charged. If you got electronic gears, make sure your Garmin is charged. Make sure you've got a new battery in your power meter. If you're using your power meter, make sure you got a new battery in your heart rate strap if that's what you're using as well. Just make sure all that stuff is done in advance, so that way you can make sure it's all working before race day as well. There's nothing worse than having a race strategy that was based on sitting on 200 watts all day, and then 5 minutes into the bike leg, you realize you don't have any power data because your power meter's not working, or your Garmin dies because you put it out there and you forgot you left it on, and it emptied its battery overnight as well. Okay. Other stuff the day before the race. So one, as I said, I'd encourage everyone to pack their gear up this weekend, but the day before the race and before you head out to the regatta center, would encourage you to pull all your gear out and just go through everything one at a time. And that includes your nutrition stuff, the whole lot. Make sure it's all there the day before. The other things to do the day before are don't do anything different than you normally do in training. So the mistakes that I see people do are, suddenly the day before they drink 6 liters of water to hydrate, but all they manage to do is just flush all the electrolytes out of their body, or they eat something different. They suddenly decide they need to eat 3 kilos of pasta the day before, and they drink a whole heap of lemonade to carb load. If that's what you normally do every day before your big training session, do it, but don't do anything different. There's nothing worse than, people wonder why they get an upset stomach on race day, and they've eaten different foods to what they would normally do. And just remember, when you do something like you want a carb load, which is a separate topic, but your body will only absorb a certain amount of muscle glycogen and or carbs. And once you reach that point, your body will get rid of the rest of it. And so if you've got a stomach that's filled with fiber and food, that has to come out. Right, and it'll probably come out when you're running on race day. So just make sure that if you normally just have a sandwich for lunch and you have your pasta for dinner, just do your normal levels of stuff and don't do anything special. And also on the hydration one, don't change your drinking habits. The day before, you might want to have one extra drink than you normally have or something, but don't suddenly. Same thing. Once you've hydrated, you're hydrated. You can't top it up anymore. Okay, so just don't do anything special the day before. So on your question, Hamza, what you should have for breakfast is whatever you normally have for breakfast before you train. So if that's toast, if that's scrambled eggs, if that's wheat bix, that's what you should be having. You definitely don't have anything different on race day. The one thing I will say, though, sometimes your timing will change, because if you guys are all going to be out there at, let's say, 5:30 in the morning, you're probably having breakfast at 3:30. Okay, so you've just got to get up earlier and just start your routine a bit different, but don't do anything different in terms of your actual intake when you go through. All right. So answering your question again, Hamza, eat a normal breakfast when you leave home. When you get to the race, I would encourage you to get there early. Just allow time to walk across the bridge because it is a fair walk if it's your first time out there. So definitely don't get there at 6:30 expecting to be able to get there quickly because you're going to be parking way down the other end, and it will be a 15, 20-minute walk to get there as well. Go to the bathroom early. I said that already. Just because the lineup gets quite big. And so if you're there trying to go to the bathroom and the bathroom lineup's not moving particularly quick and you can see the lineup to get into the water started, you just don't want to be pushing that too quickly. The other thing I would say on the question of breakfast is I would encourage you to have something about 30 minutes something to eat about 30 minutes before the actual race start. So if you're having your breakfast at sort of 3:30 in the morning, you've now gone a couple of hours. Race start for a lot of you is not till 7:30. And so you've now gone 4 hours without eating any food. But I would encourage you to have something light to eat before the actual race starts. So something as simple as a banana 30 minutes out is a good idea. I would encourage you to probably eat actual food as well. So a lot of people will go all gels or something for the race. But I feel like it's a bit unnatural to put in your stomach. Whereas I think actually putting something physical on the stomach, even you take a Vegemite sandwich or something, but something that can actually sit on your stomach and make you feel like a meal, I think is a good idea on the morning of race day as well. All right, so we're going to get into some of the logistics of the actual course. So for those of you that haven't done a half Ironman before, you're going to go into the water about 4 people at a time. Okay, so can everyone see my little green marker on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, okay. So your transition is over here, okay, and there's a hill in through this bit here. And then when you're all lining up to get in the water, the lineup will be here, okay, and you'll slowly walk down and you'll go onto the platform here. So once you're on the platform, 4 of you will go into the water at a time, and about every 5-10 seconds, they're going to send 4 people off into the water. So with that in mind, the good thing that you get out of this is you get some drafting buddies to jump in the water with. So in theory, everyone you get in the water with should be swimming a very similar time to you when they're swimming, just because you all nominated, a 4 or 5 minute window that you're going to swim in. So when you jump in the water, one thing I will say up front is the water temp's pretty cold at the moment. So be prepared for the fact that water is going to be a little bit of a rude shock when you get in, because I think it's about 17 or 18 degrees. On the upside, you're definitely getting a wetsuit. On the downside, that first jump in might be a little bit of a rude shock. You'll see lots of variety in how you get into the water. So you'll see the top guys or top athletes will dive in. You'll see the ones at the back are just taking a gentle step in. Okay, so if you're not confident diving into the water, that's absolutely fine. Just take a step forward into the water. Once you get up out of the water, you just start your swim up the regatta center when you go there. A couple of tips when you're out there is don't get in and swim hard, right? The winner is take 4 hours to finish this event. And all of you that are on this call are probably 5, 6, 7 hours plus. So when you get in the water, you want to swim at the pace that's appropriate for someone that's going to be out there for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. Okay, so for most of you, that's probably about a 7 out of 10 for effort level. When you swim, you're going to find the regatta center is a very easy place to navigate. Where, when you go down along this green sort of line here, you'll find there's the rowing buoys that guide the lanes for the actual rowers. Underneath those buoys, there is a big chain that runs under that holds it down. You can pretty much use that chain as a lane marker. So you can swim pretty much from here all the way up to here, and you can just stare at the chain and don't even need to sight when you go through. So you'll find the bulk of people when they get in will come straight across to where the buoy line is, and they will swim along the buoy line. The other thing that you'll find is because everyone's doing that, you'll get a lovely whirlpool effect of the people in front of you, okay, and you'll be right there. So I would encourage you all to jump in, and once you sort of got into a little bit of rhythm, swim across to the buoy line and just swim straight through there as you go. There is only a couple of turns that you need to do. I know on here these are marked as purple, but I think these are green for you guys. I think this is last year's photo. You turn right at the green buoy. You'll turn right at this green buoy. Once you get around to here, again, you can follow that chain underneath until you get to roughly here. And then you only need to sight for this last little section in through here. Okay, so your ability to follow and go swim straight is greatly enhanced by the fact that you can physically see the chain underneath the water. And hopefully the water visibility is good enough that you can see it when you go through. Once you get to around about here, which will be on the other side of the actual swim start, you will have to sight, you'll have to swim under the bridge, and then you just got to do a bit of a leg in to get into the transition area. The fastest way to swim is not to sight constantly. So the more often you lift your head up, the slower you will swim. So what I would encourage you to do is once you get to here and the chain disappears in the water, I would encourage you to every 10 strokes, you take a look at where you need to go, orient yourself in the right direction, take 10 strokes, swim a bit further, orient yourself in the right direction. If any of the buoys are difficult to see after you've gotten past this point, just look up and find the bridge. Now, there's a bridge here with big Olympic rings on it. So you might not be able to see the buoys in the water very easily, but just make sure that you can see the bridge, swim directly under the bridge, and then there's just a little loop around the other side to go through. A couple of other tips for race day. One of these directions will be in the sun. All right, so I would encourage you to have goggles that have tint in it, okay? Because otherwise, if you have to swim up and you can't see anything, because you've got the sun in your eyes, it's going to make for a very long 700 meters of not being able to see particularly well. Also, make sure your goggles aren't that old. So you don't want to be in the water and you find your goggles fog up. That makes sighting really, really difficult. Okay, so if you don't have a new set of goggles or a newish set of goggles, I'd encourage you to go out this week and go buy a set, use them once just to check that they work fine, okay, and save that set for race day. They can become your swimming pool goggles later, but it's always good to have a fresh set there for race day. Does anyone else have any questions about the swim course before I move on?
Dan, I can see on there there's a warm-up area. Do you recommend doing a warm-up?
I don't think it's worthwhile. And the reason I don't think it's worthwhile is because most of you are going to be out there for 6, 7, 8 hours. Okay. And I think if you go wasting a bunch of energy to warm up, my question is you can warm up in the water. Because also if you could do the warm-up area and then you go stand here for 40 minutes, I don't know how much warmed up you actually are. It's one of the hard things with triathlon is you don't get the chance to warm up and then go straight into it, right? So, but I think the virtue of the fact that you will have to warm up in potentially 18-degree water and then you're going to come out with cold hands and cold feet, and then you're going to line up here barefoot for the next 30, 40 minutes, I don't think it's worthwhile. Okay, so unless you're maybe the pros, but even then you'll see them just swinging their arms and doing dry land warm-up. What I would encourage you to do is, you all jump in the pool on a weekly basis and you do a couple of 100 meters warm up before you start your swim set. I would encourage you to take this little bit exactly the same. Okay, just treat it like a warm up. And then once you feel good, you can pick up the pace a little bit if you want. In reality, if you're swimming at 7 out of 10 at the start, we all know that the vast majority of your fastest laps are probably the first 100 or 200. Okay, so, if you just keep aiming at that effort level, you'll find by the time you get to the end, might be at 80% effort level, but you're probably at best holding the same speed as you were in that opening bit. So I wouldn't be doing any warm up personally. Swing your arms out if you feel nervous, but I wouldn't probably go to too much effort. All right. Has anyone else got any questions about the swim?
I just had one about kicking. I heard someone say that they try to not kick as much during the swim to save their legs for the bike and the run.
Yeah, I'd more say if you've got a wetsuit on, your feet are that high in the water that I don't think kicking really does much. So I would say for most people, just having a balance kick would be the most appropriate thing. But also, if you sit there and you kick a lot harder, you potentially increase your effort level quite a lot, but you probably have minimal, if any, impact on your actual swimming. I think most triathlon swimmers in a wetsuit, if you just concentrate on your catch pull and just keep your feet together with just a gentle, balance kick out the back, that's probably the fastest way for you to swim. Unless you're right up the pointy end and you're trying to win, I don't think kicking greatly makes a big difference. But I would say, just swim your normal 7 out of 10. If that involves kicking, you kick. If your normal 7 out of 10 is barely kicking, then I think that's what you should do. It's probably a separate topic, but I don't think swim technique changes regardless of whether it's in the pool or in the open water. There's definitely styles that are more successful in open water. Like a pure swimming stroke style where there's no waves, no nothing, doesn't work as well in open water. But to be fair, most triathletes don't have that range of motion to swim like that anyway. So there's very few athletes I've ever seen that are actually capable of swimming like that anyway.
Actually,
all right, is there any other question? Sorry?
What about kicking a bit just before you actually get out of the water? Heard of that one?
Yeah, I do see merit in that one. So it's definitely worthwhile to get some, blood into the legs before you stand up. So, I would actually say if you did a little bit of kicking in this last sort of 150, that's probably worthwhile just to get a little bit of movement in your legs, in even just mentally getting ready to stand up. Okay, when you come out of the water. When you do come out of the water, just keep in mind your wetsuit will be filled with water and it's quite heavy. and your legs will feel a little bit wobbly because you've been in the water for 30, 40, 50 minutes. So standing up, one, you'll feel really heavy, but don't, unless you're trying to win the event, I would say just stand up and just walk out. And then once you feel okay, just gently jog to your bike and slowly take your wetsuit off. Definitely don't rush any of that going through. All right, any other questions? No? Okay. You all have wave starts. So all of you are going to be pink, blue, green, or violet. If you were honest with your swim time and said, hey, I think, I will swim about 37 minutes for the 1.9K. Reality is when you're drafting, you will be able to swim a bit quicker. So if you think you are towards the, anywhere in this range, I definitely would encourage you to try to almost mingle towards the back, because then you can draft off the better people in terms of what you're doing. If you are over 41 minutes and you're a slower swimmer, or you're back there because you don't like getting banged around a little bit, then by all means, when you jump in the water, don't follow the chain and you can swim across to the side as well. But for most people, I would encourage you to get towards the front of your cap color, because you're going to find that you'll be able to swim with better people. And 37 to 41 minutes is quite a narrow range, as is 33 to 37. There's like 4 minutes in that. That's just tiny. So, if you can do 37, you can draft off a 33-minute person. All right, so I definitely encourage you to get towards the front. But as I said, when you're there, there's no police sort of saying, here's where pink stops and blue starts. It's all just a blending of colors. So, if you've got a blue cap, there's nothing wrong with, chucking yourself a little bit higher up into it, because your timing chip will go off when you go in the water. So it makes no difference to your actual time. Your time is when you actually jump into the water as well. All right. Is everyone nominated and know what swim cap color they are? Yep. Okay. Has anyone got any questions on that one? Oh, good. All right. So a couple of tips for the swim, and I've covered off some of these already. So for you guys, the only color buoy you need to pay attention to is the green one. Okay. So every time you see a green buoy, you turn right in the water. The other ones are just indicating going in a straight line. When you're swimming along the regatta center, it's really easy, or any center, it's really easy to lose context of where you are in the course. So there are plenty of landmarks on the edges, though, that will kind of tell you where you're up to. So there's the huts on the side, or whatever they are. They'll kind of tell you, oh, I'm at the first hut, I'm at the second hut. You swim across, you can kind of get context for how far into the event you are. Everyone hopefully has a wetsuit. Okay, I would highly encourage you to wear one, because I think it's probably too cold to not wear a wetsuit this time, which is the first time I've said that. But if you have one, definitely use it. And then the other one is take your time putting it on race day. So you can use your wetsuit to keep warm. So I would actively say, look, if you're there and you're ready an hour before, just pop your wetsuit on an hour before the race if you don't think you need to go to the bathroom, because your wetsuit is a great device just to keep you warm, and you can stand there just in your wetsuit and you can go put your clothes away and give them to friends, family, put them under the club tent or whatever. But yeah, definitely put your wetsuit on nice and early. Goggles that don't fog. I've already mentioned that one. Drafting. You have 4 people in the water with you. If you can draft off them, it gives you a huge benefit. Okay, so if you realize that you're swimming along and you can swim next to them and go the same speed, or if you pull out and try to do it your own, you're not overtaking, just sit there and let them to draft off. And if you get people swim from behind and come through you, jump on them and draft off them. You've got this big, long conga line, so you've got to make full use of that when you're out there as well. Most of you will swim your best if you swim at about 7 out of 10 for effort level. Okay, so we all know we get in the water and we do 100 meters as hard as we can. You only go a few seconds faster than if you're cruising. All right, so the benefit to pushing really hard is really not there. The bike and run are the 2 longer ones, and that's where time is made or lost. So I wouldn't waste your energy to try to go 20 seconds faster in the swim unless you're trying to win. The more you sight, the slower you will go. All right, so the more you lift your head up, the slower you'll go. So I would encourage you to count 10 strokes in your head, look up, 10 strokes in your head, look up. But as I said, on that course specifically, you can see the lane rope underneath the water. You shouldn't have to sight until you're turning right and going across the lake, and then until you get the end and you're going underneath the bridge. You should be able to swim the rest of it without needing to sight whatsoever, which is a huge benefit. And yeah, taking it easy when you transition to land, because there's probably some helpers there. So some people there in case you slip on the blue mat or just can't find your legs will help you stand up. And expect to feel a bit wobbly because you've been in the water for nearly 2Ks when you're out there as well. All right. Transition. Okay, so your transition area is in here. Okay, so when you come into transition, if it's your first time, don't rush anything. So if you're going to be out there for 7 hours or whatever it is, don't try to race for 30 seconds. All right, you are going to have to run on concrete. That can be a bit hard on the feet. So, walk briskly, or just jog very gently to find your gear. When you get into transition for the first time, I'd encourage everyone to just stop for a moment, grab a drink, grab something to eat or a gel or whatever it is, and just sort of just take a moment to pause and then grab your bike and get on with your stuff. A couple of tips that I'd probably say for your setup when you've got it in here. It's always useful to use something like a really bright towel to put on the ground next to your bike so that you can spot it, whether it's bright pink or orange or whatever it is. But just remember, if you've got a black bike, a black helmet, black shoes, and you popped it on, the Ironman 70.3 towel that everyone's got, it's a little bit harder to see. So if you can have something a little bit distinctive, it's why it's sometimes even useful to have bright bar tape sometimes to help find your bike. And the other one to remember is, there are, 1,000 bikes in here. So it's a good idea to remember, my bike is the 4th row in and it's, 3 racks along. Okay, so it's a good reminder that when you come out to go, I go 3 racks and I've got to go across to here, because when you're actually coming out and you've been swimming for a while and you get a little bit flustered, it's really easy to lose your bike. If you come out of the water last, it's really easy to find your bike. But if you come out anywhere in the middle, I still remember years ago, I was in, for whatever reason, one of the first waves to go, and I was doing Kernel and it was really busy. And so I was probably into transition and only 20 people had left. It took me 5 minutes to find my bike. And I learnt my lesson that day, that I needed to learn exactly where I left my bike, because if you've got a sea of them there and your bike doesn't stand out, it's really difficult to find your gear. When you're exiting transition, you'll run up here, you'll come out, and somewhere here is the mount line when you're going through. If you're going to do a jump on your bike and put your feet in your shoes as you're riding, great. The vast majority of you are probably not going to do that. So what I would say is pop your cycling shoes on or your triathlon shoes on in transition and do the awkward hobble to get out. When you get on your bike, you don't have to get on your bike at the mount line. Okay, you can walk or run or whatever 10, 15 meters down, because if you get out of the water and you're in a really busy patch, so let's say you're kind of the middle of the bell curve swimmer, all right, and you get out of here and there's also another 100 people that are also trying to get out of here. There's lots of people that are really poor at getting on their bike. By all means, get to the mount line and then keep going and then come to the side and get on, just for your own safety level. So don't assume, if you watch the transit or the mount line from the side, it can be pretty chaotic with people getting on, and people's awareness is not always fantastic, but you don't have to get on at the mount line. You just have to get on your bike somewhere between the start and the finish, so you can go as far along as you want to go through. I've got some other tips. I think it's on the other slide, so I won't go through it. Yep. So number one, know where your bike is. A couple of tips for the actual bike is I would encourage you to put talcum powder in your cycling shoes, just to dry up your feet, because you might not have most of you don't do a swim to bike in practice. You all do bike to run. You very rarely do that. But if you've got soft skin and then you get on the bike and you sweat through your shoes and they stay a little bit wet, it may not be a problem until the run, and then you realize that you're getting blisters on the run. So I would encourage you to pop talcum powder in your shoes. I'd also encourage the vast majority of you to wear socks when you do it, for that same reason, which is, it will only take you 30 seconds to pop some socks on. I think it's a lot more comfortable to do it. It will soak up some of the water from the swim, and it's going to make it easier or less likely to get a blister when you go through. Decide if you're running out your cycle shoes or putting them on after you mount. So I would encourage most people to pop their cycling shoes on and just do the awkward walkout, unless you think you can pop them on quickly when you get there. Another big one is making sure your bike's in an appropriate gear. So what I mean by that is you're going to get out. There's the amount of people that I see that their bike's in the big chainring in the hardest gear because that's what they popped in the car, or when they last checked it and they spun their wheel around, it sounded cool. But then when you get on and realize that the bike gear you've got, you can't get started on, okay, it's not appropriate. I would encourage you to have it in big chainring because there's more tension on the chain, so less likely to drop the chain. And I would encourage you to probably put it halfway through the rear cassette. So do definitely check what gear you're in before you get started, to make sure you don't jump on and discover that you're in the track cycling hard gear. You want to make sure it's something easy to do. Race day, you guys are all going to have to watch the weather, but it could get cold. So you're coming out of the water, which is going to be 16, 18 degrees. And then for all I know, you'll be on the bike at about 7:45 to 8:30 in the morning for most of you. It could be cold. So don't be afraid to get a vest just to cover your chest to start the day. And if you are prone to getting cold, take some arm warmers with you as well. So both those things can be taken off during the race and folded up and chucked down your tri-suit or in your back pocket or something. But it's a good idea to at least have them there and available to you, that if it is cold on race day, you can opt to use them when you go through. Because if it's 18 degrees and the air temp's 20 degrees, you might find that first 30 kilometers of the bike is freezing to be out there. But if you've got a wind vest, you can block that. Again, just stop briefly in transition, have something to eat and drink. All right. It sounds silly, but I think it's good to just stop for a moment, pause for 30 seconds, make sure you get some stuff in, think about what you're doing next, and then kind of move on. And as I said, when you get to the mount line, you don't have to mount straight away. So if it's really busy, just run straight through everyone, get to the side, and then get on afterwards. Yep. Go ahead, Tony.
I've had a look through the rules and I couldn't see anything, but people have told me that you're not allowed to wear like cycling caps or cycling gloves.
You can wear cycling gloves. You can definitely wear cycling gloves. I don't know that there's a rule against cycling caps. I don't know why there would be a rule against cycling caps.
Yeah, somebody was saying, but I think what they were talking about was like a visor or a peak cap that's rigid. So if you have an accident or whatever, but with the cycling cap, they're soft.
I don't think there's a ruling against that. I've never heard that one. Definitely cycling gloves you can wear. I don't think there's a ruling against the cycling cap, because you'll see some people wearing like a mountain bike helmet, not a full face one, but you'll see like the little sunshade at the front. So I don't see an issue with that. The only things that are banned are you can't, if you don't have a wetsuit on, you can't swim in calf socks, the calf guards. But that's the only weird rule that I kind of know. But triathlon in general doesn't have a whole heap of stuff that's banned. As long as you got two wheels and a brake and a freewheel bike, that's pretty much you're good to go. But I haven't heard that one.
Right. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions on transition?
Wait, so Dan, did you say you can't wear calf socks? So I have
you can wear calf socks as long as they're under a wetsuit.
Okay. All right.
I think triathlon preempted the fact that triathletes would push boundaries and wear calf guards made of wetsuit material. I think is what they did. I remember when that rule came out and it was a weird one because there'd never been an issue. But I suspect it was that, people would have said, yeah, that's a calf guard. It's just like 8 mil thick neoprene. That's my calves. And so they preemptively banned that one. But if it's under a wetsuit, it doesn't matter.
With the transition, like when we're coming out of the water with the wetsuit, do you recommend we start like taking it off as we get out, or is that something we should just do when we get to transition?
Definitely, I would encourage you to unzip it and pull your arms out as you're running. And then when you actually have it basically hanging down around your waist as you're running along. And then when you get to your actual spot, then pull the legs off is how you should best do it. It's pretty easy to pull the arms off as you're running. You can't pull the legs out until you stop. But same as, T2, if you want to be quick, you don't put your hat and glasses on in transition, you put them all on and you just pick them up and you run and you start putting all your gear on as you're actually running. Okay, any other questions about transition one? No? Okay. So on to the bike course. So you have a 2-lap bike course. So the regatta center is down here. Okay, you will go up and follow the regatta center and then go out, and then you go for a big long ride up here. You come back around, you'll get to here, you'll do a little loop down here, and then you'll go back out again, and then you'll come back in for one final bit. The ride is pretty much flat, so there's no real hills in there to make note of. The things to make a note of is the potholes. So typically there's a lot of potholes on the course. So just be aware of those when you're riding along so you don't run into them. The road surface can also be a little bit average when you're out there as well. But from a racing perspective, those are the only two main things that you've got to kind of be aware of. The course itself is pretty straightforward in terms of what you're doing. Has anyone got any questions about, I guess, exactly where you're riding or what that's like? Otherwise, I'll get into the tactics of how to ride it. No? Okay. All right. So number one thing that I'll talk about is making sure when you the best bike time is the one that gives you the best bike run split, right? So having an absolute amazing bike time and then a run time that's half walking is not useful. So you need to make sure that when you're pacing yourself for the bike, you're pacing yourself like someone who's got to run a half marathon off the bike. So what I would say for most of you, you're at a point in your training where you've all got 2 weeks to go. So hopefully you've all been using power or heart rate or some sort of perceived effort level to go to race on. You want to stick with that plan on race day. So I fairly data-driven sort of guy and I like numbers, but if you've got power meter, you're wanting to aim for around about 70 to 85%. Okay, so if you can finish the bike leg in 2.5 hours or less, you're up towards this end. Okay, if you're going to take 3 to 4 hours to finish the bike leg, you want to be down this end of the spectrum. So the faster you can go, the harder you can go on the bike. But you do need to keep this relatively low. So what I mean by that is if I won't go into power too much, but if your threshold power is 200 watts, then, if you're going to be out there for a while, then you want to be holding 70% of that number. If you think you can do the bike leg in 2.5 hours, you can be up here at 85% of that number. Regardless of whether you're going uphill, downhill, flat, your goal should be to pedal consistently and have the same power output from start to finish. Okay, so when you get out of the water and all your friends and family are cheering for you and you feel tapered off and excited, don't get carried away because you got 90 Ks to ride the bike. So if anything, just go, hang on, calm down. I'm just going to keep this first 5 Ks, find my legs, okay, and then get into it. Just don't push too early because you won't pay for it on the bike. You'll pay for it at kilometer 12 on the run when you realize that you can't run particularly well anymore. All right. A couple of little things when you're out there, heart rate, I would encourage you to have some sort of guide for you on race day. So have a look at what your heart rate is in training. So if you're used to riding the M7 or Parapark or somewhere where, the terrain's very different, your average speed is going to be completely different. But say you go, but my heart rate's always 150 beats. Go out there on race day and ride to whatever speed you need to ride to, but keep your heart rate around the same level because then your effort level is the same as what you've done in training. Okay. Good gear selection on that course is pretty easy because it's flat. But your ideal world is you have the same power number on your screen. You're changing gears to keep the power number the same, and you keep your leg speed constant. So that course, there's not much in the way of downhills and bits and pieces. So it's pretty much constantly pedalling from start through to finish. 90K is a long way to ride on a bike, but it's good to mentally break that down. So you've got 2 laps. All right, but you might break that into 4 sections, and you have out, and then you got back, and then you got out, and then you got back. So you can sort of in your head, I'm 1/4 of the way, I'm halfway, I'm 3/4, I'm the whole way done. It's much easier to think like that than it is to think, I've got 68 kilometers to go. It's much easier to break that down in your head. The bike is the place where you have to fuel up because it's the place that you can absorb nutrition better. But you should be treating that bike leg as a 2 to 4 hour buffet. All right, so you should really be saying, hey, I need to eat every 30 minutes or so on the bike. Hopefully that's what everyone's sort of doing in training. You need to be making sure you're drinking constantly. So be aware that race day may not be hot and you may not feel like you need to drink, but you should be trying to get a certain level of hydration in, knowing that, hang on, I've got a half marathon to start. I don't want to start sort of 2 liters of sweat down. I want to start in an okay condition. So as a general rule, you probably want to be eating about 250 to 400 calories an hour. How you do that between your gels, your food, your bananas, your sports drink is up to you. But your ballpark is 250 to 400 calories an hour. And for most of you, you probably want to drink through, 2 water bottles, so about 1.5 to 2 liters across that time. So if you're a 2.5 hour bike rider, because you can bike pretty quick, you might go through 2 water bottles. If you're going to be out there for 4 hours, you're obviously going to go through 3 or more when you're out there. But you should have a rough idea of, hey, I've started my bike with 2 water bottles and you've broken this race into 2 laps. And after lap 1, you should be aiming to be finished with one of those. And by the second lap, you should be aiming to getting close to finishing that second one as well. Okay. Tony, question?
Yeah. Have you got any suggestions with the best way to actually keep your fuel on your bike, apart from obviously in your back pockets or whatever? Are there tips and tricks on the best way to do that?
Have you got a time trial bike, a triathlon bike?
I've got a road bike. Yeah.
The best way is probably in your back pocket. So are you wear a tri suit or are you going to wear a cycling kit? What are you going to wear?
No, I'm going to wear the tri-suit, but what I've found is when I've been testing it, yeah, I can reach around the back. That's not an issue.
Yep.
But trying to ride and rip those tops off the gels.
Yep.
And I have gone and put extension bars on my road bike.
Yep.
And it's a real balancing act, you know.
Yeah. So a couple of things, you can pre-cut those things to make them easier to tear. So you might actually have all your gels and you just get a pair of scissors before the race and just snip the tops, just so that when you go tear it, it's easier, or you can grab it into your teeth and tear it. That's definitely one way to do it. Back pocket for what you're doing is probably the easiest way. The other thing you could do, you can get something like that. Okay, that goes on your top tube. So you can get ones that are Velcroed, and then you can pop all your, I don't know where people see that, but you can pop all your, your gels in there. So and then that'll go sort of just behind your stem. That's another way to hold enough there. But for a 90K bike ride, I don't know how much you're carrying, but let's say you're carrying 6 gels with you. You probably should be able to put 6 gels in your back pockets when you're out there. And I'd probably say that's the most practical way to do it. And if you think you're gonna need 6, I'd encourage you to take 8 just in case you need more or you drop one or something as well. But there is the opportunity to pick stuff up from the aid stations too. Right, Hamza?
How often are the water bottle refill stations on the cycle?
They are about every 30 Ks, I think, from memory. So you should be able to get to one basically every hour. So I don't know exactly where they are, but I assume there's probably one here. And there's probably one, up at one of these turnaround points as well. Because each of these
16, 38, 59, 81.
Yep. So I think that roughly lines up with what I said. So there should be one at basically either end of the course. Should be. Yeah, because it'll be, whatever kilometer, because you'll come through here, and the first one you'll probably encounter will be one of these ones up here. And then you'll encounter another one here, then you'll come back up here, and then there'll be another
Dan,
one.
it's before you start doing the weavy bit at the end. So it's
somewhere here?
Yeah, somewhere there. And I'm pretty sure it's on both sides. In both places, it's on both sides.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're normally every 20 to 30 Ks, so you shouldn't have to go more than an hour at a time, regardless of what speed you are. Yeah. All right, does that answer your question, Hamza?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
On pacing, I just want to point out a couple of things. So this is one of the guys that I coach, and anyone that I coach will be familiar with these estimates of time and bits and pieces. But the main thing I want to point out is the differences in terms of how much extra speed you'll get or lose at that course if you decide to push hard or to sort of go easy. So this is a guy that I coach, and his FTP, I think, is about 250. So for him, his estimated, power that he should hold on race day is about 185 watts. Okay, and that should give him a time of about 2 hours and 40 minutes to do it, which is normally pretty accurate. But what I also prepared for him, and I wanted people to see, was what happens if you decide to go harder or easier. Okay, so if instead of holding 180 watts, he decides to go 25 watts harder, you only get 7 minutes quicker. Okay, but I guarantee you that he won't be able to run if he does that. Okay, and all you get is 7 minutes. And if he goes easier and he goes 15 watts easier, he only loses 6 minutes. All right, so this is where it's useful to have in your head that if you decide to push really hard, you will only gain single digits of numbers in minutes to do that. But if you start walking at kilometer 18, you will lose all that time and more. And I guarantee you weren't running well until you suddenly decided to walk. I guarantee you it was a slow descent into running, to jogging, to walking little bits, to then walking home with your tail between your legs. So what I want to, I guess, make my point is that you want to bike at a pace that gives you the best bike run time, and put your ego aside a little bit sometime, because the differences between going the right speed or too hard or too easy is you won't gain or lose that much time. So even if you go out there and go, I didn't really push very hard, I guarantee you didn't really lose that much time in terms of what you were doing. So, if you go out there and go, using a power meter and just go, I'm just going to go 7 out of 10, and I know that'll give me 25 or 30 Ks an hour or whatever it is, a couple of kilometers an hour only makes single digits of difference. But if you run well, I guarantee you'll have a much better experience when you're out there on race day as well. Okay. Aid stations. So I think it was Matt that originally asked about the aid station. So when you're out there, there are 4 or 5 aid stations on the course. They will all be set up like this. Okay, so you will ride past. So first thing, you don't have to ride past at 30 kilometers an hour and try to grab water bottles off little kids at 30 kilometers an hour. Okay, remember the water bottles are wet because they've usually scooped them into the Gatorade bucket to get them out. So they will be wet and slippery. And catching something off a kid when going 35 k's an hour is not easy. And kids are not always that amazing at passing stuff. So when you get to the aid stations, if you need to grab water or anything like that, when you approach the aid station, number one, if you've got old drink bottles that you're chucking to replace, there's usually like a zone where you can chuck all your bottles before you get to the station. Okay, and it'll be pretty obvious. And usually the local kids get excited because you chuck stuff at them and they try to catch it. Okay. There's also rubbish spots. There are toilets and stuff as well. When you get here, you'll ride along and you'll call out what you want to the volunteers, and they will run next to you and try to pass it to you. Okay, so you might just say, I want water, or I want electrolyte, or I want whatever. The kids will run next to you. Just remember that 15 kilometers an hour is 4-minute K pace. So if you don't think the kid can run 4-minute K pace, all right, make sure that you ride at a speed that he can run at, okay, to make it easier for you when you go through. And also be aware when you are through here, it's not too uncommon that other people will drop their water bottle. So just be aware that there might be the odd water bottle shooting across the road when you're here as well. So just keep your eyes out for that sort of stuff. But generally speaking, you can go through, you can call out what you want, just slow down, the kids will run with you. If you're not confident to get it as you're moving, I think the official instructions say you can't stop, but you can, because you can't go to the bathroom and ride a bike at the same time. All right, so you can pull over and you can just say, if you're not at the front of the race and you just want to drink because you've got, Tony, you got your aero bottle or something on the front with the aero bars, you're not confident, just stop and ask them for what you want. They'll give it to you, then clip back in and off you go again. Okay, but just be careful through there, but just be aware that other people might drop their stuff, and also be aware that the kids, they're little 10-year-old kids, so they might not be amazing at passing your stuff when you go through. Generally speaking, I would encourage you all to carry all your needs on your bike from home. The reason being is, one, the kids will mix up electrolyte, but they tip in, the powder and fill it up with water from the tap, and then they stir it with a stick or whatever. So one day you'll get something that tastes like cordial, and the next day you'll get something that tastes very vaguely like lemon flavor because it's so diluted. So if you can take your stuff from home, it's only 90 kilometers. I'd encourage you to be self-sufficient. But let's say it's really hot and you want some water to wash down or something like that, or you finish one of your bottles and you chucked it and you just want water instead of a sports drink, go grab what they have off the course. What I would also say is the foods and stuff that are available, again, I would encourage you to use whatever you use in training. So if you use Winners bars from Woolworths, don't suddenly try a different brand because it might upset your stomach when you go. Okay, Jasmine, you had a question?
Yeah, I've got 2. First, like if we're chucking our bottles if we've used them, does that mean like what bottles then should we be using?
Your oldest, least favorite ones, because you're not getting them back.
Okay. And also like if we're not as confident with like our bike handling skills like throughout the race, like if we're not at the aid station or anything, but just for like drinking water or taking nutrition,
you can stop anywhere on the side of the road and stop.
Okay.
That's absolutely fine. So don't be afraid. Just pick somewhere safe to stop. No one's going to get upset with you for stopping on the side of the road and grabbing a drink. Just clip back in and get started again.
Okay, cool.
Dan, the only thing I'd say with that is just be careful with the gravel on some of the roadside bits when you're pulling off. So just be super careful.
Yep. The only one you will get in trouble for is if you go, need a toilet break. Don't ideally do that outside of the aid stations because they don't look kindly upon doing that in the trees. So if you can do that at the aid station, it's definitely better. Okay. A couple of tips for coming into transition. So you've done the bike leg, you'll come back in, you'll go back past the regatta centre, riding up. It's a good time then in that last little sort of couple of 2Ks down the straight to just get yourself ready. So you might want to have something to eat or drink just down that straight, preparing to get ready for the half marathon. A couple of quick tips. You've been probably used to going 30 kilometers an hour. Make sure you dismount at a speed that you can run. So again, 15 kilometers an hour for most of you is not a speed that you can run at. So make sure that when you get off the bike to dismount, Just make sure that it's not going too quick. Otherwise, your bike will go flying up in the air when you do it. When you are there, I would encourage you to change socks again. Right? And the reason is for blisters. So put on a dry set of socks so that you can mop up that sweat again and get started again just to prevent blisters. I've said that a few times, but it's because if you get a blister, it's a very, very long run if you've got a blister on your foot. So it's always worthwhile. Just if you're trying out there to win your age group, no, go barefoot or don't change your socks or whatever. But if you're going to be out there for 6-7 hours and you're going to come 87th in your age group, just change socks because it'll make it more comfortable for you when you run. Again, pop some talcum powder into your shoes to try to mop up some of the sweat. Again, just to prevent the blisters when you're there. And if you are one of those people that tends to get blisters between your toes, doing stuff like popping some Vaseline between your toes, but in transition can be a good thing to do as well. The same goes for the odd person that finds that they get chafing across their chest as well. It's not a bad idea to either put Vaseline or some Band-Aids across if you're going to find that your chest starts to bleed towards the end as well. Elastic laces. I'm personally not a fan of elastic laces for long distance racing. The reason I say that is your feet will tend to swell in the heat. So a lot of you potentially going to be running in, if it's a hot day, 28 degrees, the elastic just sort of keeps it really tight. If you've got normal shoelaces, you can always undo your shoelaces and loosen them up when you go through. But it's just something to be aware of because some of you probably do all your long runs in your normal shoes and then you might have a faster set with elastic laces that you're not used to running 21 Ks in. So I just say just be aware of that on race day when you go through. That's probably it for that one. Most of you are probably going to run with a race belt and a number. You can pop that on in transition when you're there. And if you want to speed up your transition, grab your hat, grab your sunnies, grab your race belt and put it all on when you're actually running. There was a question before in regards to sunscreen. If you are, you do get burnt, I would encourage you to pop on sunscreen. But the easiest way to do that is probably a spray can sunscreen just to try to put on before you get started as well. All right, has anyone got any questions about that transition too? No? Okay, cool. So the run course that you've got is a 3-lap course. It's largely flat in terms of what it is, except for one part up here, which has a little bit of a hill. So you will come out of transition, which is here. You'll run straight over the bridge. You'll run up this part of the course. You'll turn around. You'll run out, you'll go up here, you'll come back around, you'll run up to the church, you'll come back in, and then that is the end of one lap, okay? You will do that 3 times. On the end of the 3rd lap, you will run past transition, you'll run all the way up here, which will seem like the longest 2Ks of your life, and then
Dan, I
you'll
think
run
you turned
back.
the wrong way coming out of the regatta
No?
centre there. Yeah.
Oh, hang on, do you come out and go left that way?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry, all right. Sorry, you come out and go this way first before you come back around. But yeah, on the end of the 3rd lap, you'll continue the run out in this direction through here. So if you've got friends and family, I'd probably recommend that you encourage them to hang around this area here because they will see you at each of the turns that you have. So you'll find the bulk of the spectators will be in that general vicinity because it's a good place to keep an eye on everyone when you're going through. There will be an aid station about every 2 kilometers on the run. Okay, so depending on how fast you're, every 10 to 15 minutes, you'll get an aid station there to use. And as I said, the bulk of that is reasonably flat, except for running over the bridge. And this section up through here, there's a little bit of a hill in through there, but the bulk of it is flat. A lot of it is in the sun without a lot of shade as well. So just be aware of that when you're out there too. All right, has anyone got any questions about the run before I talk about how to pace yourself?
Just one thing on the run, can you wear a hydration vest, not a Camelback?
Yeah, you can.
You can.
If you want to, you can. My only thing is, I'd probably say, look, do you need one? Because if you got a vest on, one, it's going to heat up a fair bit, so it's going to get pretty warm against your body when you're out there. There is an aid station every 2 kilometers, so you've got the chance to stop and drink plenty in the interim bits. I probably would say you don't need one. If you really want to take one, yeah, you definitely can. But for my mind, you're probably going to have to top up the water at the aid stations anyway. In which case, I'd say, look, just drink at the aid station, then run to the next one.
Yeah, okay.
And then you don't have to carry the extra kilo with you on your back when you're running too.
Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of pacing, I spoke about how to pace for the bike and making sure that you pace appropriately. For most of you, this is a heart rate zone. So this is zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. If you're going to pace yourself well for a half marathon, particularly off the bike, you need to make sure that your heart rate stays down. Okay, so you don't want to start with a heart rate down here that just slowly comes up to here and then you're redlining. Okay, I guarantee you hit hour 4, you will not be able to redline anymore because you're going to run out of gas in terms of what you're doing. So you really need to run at a speed that you can keep your heart rate down and aerobic. Or if your heart rate's getting higher, you need to take frequent walk breaks. So depending on your ability level, at a bare minimum, I would tell you the run has 10 to 11 aid stations. So break the race down. It's no longer 21 Ks. You can count in your head, I have to get 11 drinks and then I'm done, right? And that's a much easier way to eat the elephant. So when you're out there, I would encourage you to run. And then when you see the aid station, you specifically go, I'm going to take a 30 to 60 second break. Your heart rate gets to come down. You have your drink, you get all your fluids in, and you start running again, and your heart rate might start to come up. You find the next aid station and you walk, okay? That, for a first timer, is the best way to approach this event, okay? It helps break down the race because then you just go, I can run 2Ks, okay? And then I get my drink and I get my Gatorade or whatever it is they're serving, and then I'm going to psych myself up for the next one. But you definitely need to keep the heart rate down to the best of your ability. I tell all the people that I coach that you need to keep the heart rate down until you get to about 15 Ks in, and then you can do whatever you want. Okay, but I guarantee you, whatever you want is usually just doing what you're currently doing. Okay, because you'll get to that point, and I've never met anyone that said, I felt fresh and I thought I'd run harder. They all just go, I'm doing the best I can to keep running at this space. Okay, and that's what I would encourage you to do as a first timer for that event. So there are some people, if you're first timer and running is not a strong suit, every time your heart rate gets up to here, you just walk. All right, and then you run again. Every time it gets to here, you walk, okay? But you got to keep your heart rate down here. There's some people that you can probably run happily in this heart rate zone, but I would still say when you get to the aid station, you walk, okay? And then you come back up. And if you can do that process all the way through to here, then I would say from there on, you can run straight if you want, and you can try to make up your 30 seconds you lost from starting back here, but that's going to be your best way to go from start through to finish. All right, is that, in terms of pacing and strategy, has anyone got any questions about how to approach that one? No? All right. You'll find when you get to the aid stations will be a similar layout to what you had on the bike, okay? Except this time you're not going to have little kids running next to you. When you're out there, they will have, bathrooms if you need it. They will have your water. You'll have, I think it's Morton's is the sponsor, so you'll have your Morton's sports drink in there. There will be some food options, which will be from Morton's and probably some bananas and stuff as well. For most people, would encourage you to have a really simple nutrition strategy for the run. And for most people, I would say you take a cup of Coke, degassed Coke, you take a cup of water, and then you run to the next aid station. So I think having simple sugars on the run is the best way to go. So basically take the caffeine and the sugar in from the can of Coke, mix it with water to wash it down, and then you go to the next one and you repeat that process again. I think trying to take on board too much food, it's hard to process the food when you're running. And I think, trying to eat squishy gels for 8 hours straight is not something the body's used to either. And so some people that have an upset stomach, I would say, yeah, but if you sat in your office all day and all you had was gels every 30 minutes, you'd probably feel pretty average too by the afternoon. But I do think the Coke and water strategy is probably the best one for most people. But if you do like having gels, that's definitely something that is worthwhile probably trying on race day as well. I would probably just minimize the actual food intake that you have. The food is for the bike. The run is for the simple solutions when you get there. All right, as I said, keep your heart rate down, and having that walk break potentially reduces some of the risks of cramping as well by giving a neural break to the legs when you're out there. And as I said, Coke and water is a simple strategy that works for most people when you're out there. So some tips for the run, keep your heart rate down. Okay, so zone 2 is nice and aerobic. For some of you, zone 3, which means that your heart rate's getting up a little bit, but you're still very much aerobic when you're doing it. This also comes down to how long the run leg's going to take you. If you can run the whole thing in an hour and a half minutes, you can go towards the pointier end. You know, if you're going to be out there running for 3 hours, then you need to be on this lower end to make sure that you're not burning through too much sugar as you do it. I would tell most people to use heart rate as the primary guide for their run speed on race day. So go out running. You should all know, hey, I can do my long, easy run and I hold 6 minutes per cadence. All right. And so if you go out there and you look down and you go, oh, I'm doing 450, you didn't suddenly become an amazing athlete. You're running too fast. So you need to adjust yourself to what you can do. So use your heart rate as a guide, but then use your speed as a secondary indicator to make sure what you're doing is sensible. Okay, so you're not going to set a 10K PB into the race. That's adrenaline and getting excited and all those things. Just make sure that your speed looks sensible for what you're doing. I'd actively encourage you, particularly for the first 5Ks of the run, to just really hold yourself back a little bit, because you're going to find that, you know, you are excited. It is easier to run quicker at that point. But later on, I would rather see you try to maintain your run speed than start to have to walk because you can't run anymore. So it's always best to hold yourself back. The aid stations, you definitely want to take your time to get the fluids in. So don't rush through them, because if you find that, you know, you've rushed and you spilled half the water and Coke all over yourself, you're not going to get those fluids in. You need to make sure that those fluids go in, because you are going to all be running at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. It is going to be warm. You've already been going for 3-4 hours between the swim and the bike. You need to make sure that you get the fluids in. So just take that short walk break to make sure you get everything in that you need, set yourself, and then you go again. And remember, it's not a 21K run. It's just 10 or 11 aid stations. So you got 10 or 11 drink stations to do, and then it's done. It's a much easier way to think about the whole thing. If you need to go to the bathroom during it, you know, the bathrooms will get utilized, but try to go as early as possible so that you don't, you know, need to suddenly start fighting with other people to get the bathroom breaks when you're out there as well. All right. Has anyone got any questions on the run stuff before I move on to nutrition? Big ones for a run, honestly, just keep your heart rate down and just make sure you run at an appropriate pace and take plenty of walk breaks on purpose through the aid stations. They'd be my biggest tips for you. Nutrition. So there's a couple of generalizations. So in terms of nutrition, there's lots of ways to go about trying to fill yourself up. So the best analogy I can give you is that you are a bathtub on race day filled with water. Okay. When you start the race, you pull the plug out. That's you burning energy. All right. And then you need to turn the tap on. That's you eating. Okay. And you need to make sure that the bathtub doesn't empty. Right. So you've got the plug out, you've got the tap on. You got to make sure that it doesn't drain too fast or you're going to run out of gas. And then you're going to get to 12 Ks in, and doesn't matter how much Coke you drink, you won't be able to absorb it fast enough to get back to what you're doing. So you need to be able to make sure that you're filling up with as many calories as you can and making sure that your pace is appropriate so that the bathtub's not emptying out too fast when it's going through. Having said all that, in general, you can absorb between 250 and 400 calories an hour. Okay. So if I use the Hewkins family as an example, you've got two people that probably greatly differ in height, and you would assume that Glenn can take in more calories per hour than Anne-Marie, just based on the fact that one's about 2 foot taller than the other one. Okay, so when you're out there, you want to try to get as much in as you can. You're going to find it's easier to absorb the calories when you're on the bike than it is on the run. But keep in mind, you want to get as much in as you sort of can. So I would encourage you, if you haven't sort of looked at your nutritional products, go pull up the labels, you know, see how many servings are in whatever product you've got. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 2, and see how many calories per hour that is. And then go, oh, how many calories are in my sports drink? How many calories are in my Cliff Bar and my gel? And how many am I intending to take per hour when I go through here? And just try to get yourself in this range. And that's probably a fairly safe range to do. Keep in mind that you're all probably burning somewhere between 600 and 800 calories an hour, okay, during the daytime. So every hour you are running into a deficit, you just need to make sure that you don't hit that deficit before the end of the race. In terms of water intake, same thing. You want around about 1 water bottle per hour, okay, depending on who you are and depending on the temperature of the day as well. So if it's, you know, only 18 degrees, you're probably not going to feel particularly thirsty, but I would encourage you to try to get through close to 2 bottles just because you will need it towards the run. If it is 32 degrees, you might end up drinking more than that. Keep in mind, some of you that have your calories sitting in your water bottles, If you decide not to drink as much because it's cold, you're not consuming as many calories as you planned. All right. And conversely, if all your calories are in your water bottles and you drink 3, or 4, just keep in mind that you potentially just had a lot more calories than you planned for as well. So just keep that in mind when you're sort of doing your maths on what you need. It's fine to drink water on race day and water only if you want, but I would encourage you to take some sort of electrolytes in terms of what you're doing. So you are going to sweat a lot. There will be lots of salts that come out. If you get an imbalance or a lack of salt, you can't contract your muscles properly. So it's always a good idea to have something with your sodium, magnesium, potassium in it. Most sports drinks will have that in differing kind of levels. If you don't like taking sugary sports drinks, you can always get electrolyte tablets that just have that, and you pop it into your water bottle as you go. Some of you might choose to take salt tablets and just drink water. That's okay, but I would encourage everyone to some extent to take a level of electrolyte across the day. And as I said before, make sure you've done that at least once or twice in training before you do it as well. When you're on the run, I would encourage you to avoid, actual food, and I would actually say to go for the really, really simple stuff, just to digest it quickly. And that's purely because you don't want it bouncing around in your gut on the run. I think it's easier just to absorb straight sugar into your bloodstream as you go through. But my advice will be the opposite for the bike. On the bike, I think you should avoid, the really sugary stuff, and I think you should try to eat stuff that's going to be a slower release when you go through. And last one, carry all your fluids if you can, rather than using the stuff that's supplied. And that's purely because I just don't trust the 12-year-old kids on the side of the road to mix it properly when they're out there. And and also you just don't know whether, what they're supplying is exactly what you're used to as well. Okay. Has anyone got any tips on nutrition, or got any questions on nutrition? Because that's a big one for race day as well. No? Okay. All right. The next one is, one that's not talked about as much, but it's mindset. So there's the old saying that if you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you can't. And I think that's very, very accurate. So when you're out there, you need to make sure that you are your biggest supporter and that you are your biggest advocate and that you're only saying positive things to yourself during the race. So there are plenty of times that you will be tired during the race. That's normal. Okay, so you're out there, it's 14 Ks in, you realize you still got 7 Ks to go and you're tired and you don't want to run anymore and you have to keep running. You need to tell yourself positive things. So you've got to say, hey, I'm running well. Hey, I'm biking well today. Hey, I'm swimming well. You can't let the negative thoughts go in. Anytime you have the negative thoughts, you will respond accordingly. So if you say, I'm running badly today, I guarantee you will look like you're running badly. Okay, but if you tell yourself, I'm running well today, I don't feel tired, okay, you will run well. As soon as you start telling yourself you're tired, as soon as you start telling yourself I'm having a bad day, your day will go down in a spiral. Okay, I've seen it plenty of times where, someone's very competitive and they wanted to get out of the water in 27 minutes and they see their watch and it doesn't say 27, it says 31. And then they think, geez, I'm having a bad day. And the rest of their day goes according to that. And what they don't see is that it's a slow swim day, right? So everyone's got a slow swim time today. Or, hey, I'm on the bike and I'm not averaging the speed that I wanted, okay, which is an outcome, not a process, because the road surface and the wind and all these things just don't allow that today. And everyone has slow bike times. But you've got to sit there and go, no, I went out to do this in the swim, this in the bike, this on the run, okay? And then whatever time I get is the time I deserve. You have to embrace that, okay? But you have to say positive self through your things throughout the daytime. You will have hopefully some friends and family to cheer you on, okay? So make sure when you see them, you chest up and look happy and run past and high five. It's always good, but just make sure that you are constantly telling yourself that you're doing well throughout the day. All right, and just concentrate. As I said, the easiest way to concentrate is on a process, not on the outcome. Don't look at your watch and think, oh, I've got to speed up because otherwise I'm not going to break 6 hours or all these things. Okay, you can look at your watch when you're down the end straight and you got 10 minutes to go. You can look at it then, but until then, you focus purely on the process of what you need to do. The other one too is don't focus on what other people are doing. Only focus on what you're doing. And this goes for not just race day, but in the lead up to the race and particularly the day before the race. I guarantee you will see friends in triathlon and you'll be there and you'll ask them how you're going and they'll tell you all the training that they've done and all the kilometers they did and all this stuff. And it's them offloading their insecurities to you to tell you that they're ready to race. But what they did is not what you had to do. All right. What you need to do, you already did. Okay, so don't sit there thinking, oh man, I wasn't doing open water swims every week. I wasn't riding 500 Ks a week. You did what you needed to do and you did the best you could to get there. What they did doesn't really matter. Okay, and on race day, it's the same thing. If you're out there racing, don't be thinking, oh, where's this person? You know, I normally beat them in training and they're ahead of me. None of that matters. Okay, for all you know, they're biking way too hard, or maybe they're having an amazing day. You stay stuck entirely on what you're doing and your process, and you will get the time that you deserve. What everyone else does is irrelevant. Okay, and unless you want to sprint finish down the finishing chute, okay, ignore all that stuff until you're actually at that pointy end of the race. Okay. The other one is breaking the race down into little chunks, right? So, you know, it's not a 1.9K swim, 90K bike, a 21K run, because when you're in the swim, you only think about the swim. When you're in the bike, you only think about the bike. When you're on the run, you only think about the run. All right. So when you're in the swim, you can break it down however you want. But, you know, for me, you know, it's 3 legs. You swim up, you know, there's leg 1, you swim across, there's leg 2, and then you swim back, I find the bridge, and then I get out. All right. So there's your 3 legs. When you get on the bike, you've got 2 laps. So there's out and back twice. There's four sections in my head. And then when you get to the run, you're not running 21K. You've just got to go, I run to the 11 aid stations and I'm done. Okay. And it's really easy mentally to go, there's 1 aid station, there's 2, I'm almost done. It's really easy from there. So just break it down in your head, because if you try to think, you're in the swim, you're thinking about all the things you've got to do on the bike or run, it's overwhelming. You just think about what you got to do in that moment. So when you're on the bike, you know, this is your opportunity to eat, pace yourself ready for the run, but you're just focusing on the bike. And when you get to the run, you don't worry about all the stuff in the past. You just do what you're required to get the best run time when you're out there as well. Okay. Has anyone got any questions on, you know, I guess positive mindset on race day? No? Okay. Everyone's lovely and positive. All right.
I've just practiced because I always train with music, and I know we can't have music, so I've got my set list on in my head. So it starts off with Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, and
I have Tiger on there.
Yeah, sorry, what was it?
I have the Tiger playing there as well.
No, I haven't got Survivor, but I've rediscovered Kate Bush. So there's a lot of You Run Up That Hill. But yeah, no, I've just so now.
Yeah, you'll find the race day actually goes quite quickly anyway, because you'll in training it can drag on a bit sometimes, but on race day it before you know it, the swim and the bike are over, and then you're on the run, and you know, it all does go quite quickly. And there's a lot of stuff to see. Like when you're out training on your own, it can be a bit mundane, but when you're there on race day, there's people everywhere, there's bikes everywhere, there's aid stations, there's stuff happening. It's all a bit more entertaining. It does tend to go a lot quicker. Now, I spoke about all the positive mindset stuff, and then I'll move to the opposite, which is preparing for when stuff goes wrong. All right. So I think it's always important to have a plan for what to do if something goes wrong. And the reason I say that is if you kind of decide what you're going to do about it before race day, if it happens on race day, you can deal with it quite calmly. And so I'm going to go through all the things that might go wrong, and then offer you guys some suggestions on how you're going to deal with those when you're out there. And then you can, you know, if you get a flat tire, you go, that's okay. I decided I was going to stop on the side of the road. I know it's going to take me 10, 15 minutes to fix it. I've accepted this is okay. And I get back on. So the couple of things that can go wrong, I'm going to do it in order of swim, bike, and run. So number 1 is the swim, which is losing your goggles or they fog up. Okay. So I would say if any of that happens, if you dive in the water and your goggles fall off your head, okay, or if you start swimming and you find that they fog up and you can't see them, I would encourage you just to swim to the side gently, okay, and either put them back on your head or put them in the water and get them unfogged again, and then pop them back on your face and then get going again. Okay, anytime you fix these things up, it's going to take you 30 seconds, which is nothing across the course of the day. But don't jump in and then think, oh, I've lost my goggles. This is all, you know, falling apart. Just do it very, very calmly. And in the event you dive in and you flat out lose your goggles, just swim without them. Okay, you'll be right as well. Okay, unlikely to happen, but that's okay. You might get knocked around in the water. Okay, no one's going to do it on purpose, but you might get knocked around in the water. If it does happen, same thing. Pull to the side. All right, just take a breather, get your breath back, and then when you're ready, face back down and you go again. Remember all the the life-saving guys on their kayaks are out there. You're allowed to grab onto them and take as much time as you want to get your breath back. So if you're tired halfway through the swim, you can swim up to one, you can grab onto them, you can hang there for 5 minutes, have a chat to them, and then get your breath back before you get going again. You're allowed to do that as well. If you're near the end of the cutoff, just don't look too tired because they might want to drag you out. But you're allowed to stop there and do that. When you jump in the water will be cold. So be mentally ready for that one. All right. But it might be that you put your face in, it's really cold. Maybe just set up and, have a couple of goes of head in and out just to get used to it. And then once you're used to it, you'll be okay. But just be aware the water is a bit of a shock. Getting anxious is always a big one that people talk about. So I think you've got to work out how to calm yourself down before the race. So I would always say, look, if you're anxious in the water, go line up with people that you know that make you feel calm before you jump in, or just before you get in. Don't think about all the stuff that might be in the water. Just try to think calming thoughts before you get in. So I would encourage you that, if you do get anxious about the water, focus on something that makes you calm. All right, and just jump in and then just focus on what you're doing. So I always say focus on the process. So just think, I've got to do this with my arm, I've got to move my hips, I've got to lift my head up, I've got to do this. But focus on all those things to keep your attention away from whatever it is that makes you anxious about the water. And if you do have an anxiety attack in the water or something goes wrong, you can swim across to one of the safety guys and hang on there until you feel comfortable again. And then you put your head down and you go again. Okay. But there's nothing wrong with stopping. There's nothing wrong with breaststroking for a while. There's nothing wrong with backstroking for a while. There's nothing wrong with going to the side and just treading water for a while. All those things are perfectly okay. Just make sure you do them calmly when you do them. All right. On the bike, most things can be mitigated by making sure you get your bike serviced and checked, hopefully in the next week or so before race day. So things that can go wrong are obviously flat tire, having mechanical issues, losing your power meter, losing your heart rate monitor. Just make sure you've got spares to be able to change your tire. If you've got a tubeless setup, make sure you've got sealant in there that works. Make sure that your tires are relatively new. Don't use tires that all have nicks and cuts in them. If you've got a power meter and stuff on your bike, make sure you've changed the battery recently. All right, make sure, same thing with your heart rate monitor. If you're used to having all that stuff, just make sure your battery's charged. If you've got certain battery systems on your bike, make sure you got your spare one there or your charger there, just in case you need it on race day. All right, a lot of the charging systems will run off a USB, right? So you can always, if you're super nervous, you can go check your bike in the morning and you can have your little power bank and your charging dock and you can go charge it up again on race morning if you're paranoid. There's lots of ways to kind of do that. Getting a bike serviced and checked over is usually the best way to mitigate most of those things. And, it's always good if people know how to change their own bike tire as well. There are mechanics that float around on the course, but you might wait a long, long time to see one. So you're always better off to be able to change your tires yourself. Definitely carry spare tubes and tires. I've seen people do races and have no spares, and then you have a flat tire and you're the far end of the course. You've got a really long walk back, or you got to wait for the sag wagon to pick you up. You're better off to sit on the side of the road for 15 minutes and fix it yourself. Okay. The run is usually the place where stuff tends to go a bit more wrong because you're tired. So the big ones are cramping, blisters, or just flat out getting tired. So number one, cramps. Cramps will happen under two circumstances usually: when you're going far harder than you used to, or you're going far longer than you used to. Both of them are probably relevant for this race. So I doubt any of you did a 90K bike ride and a 21K run with a 1.9K swim to start with. So most of you have not seen what happens to your body at hour 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, you can mitigate this by pacing yourself appropriately. So if you try to run too hard or bike too hard, your chance of cramping go up. But if you do start to cramp, the best way to address it is one, slow right down. All right, so if you're running, you stop running and you start walking. All right, you need to get salt up underneath your tongue. So they don't understand cramping too well. If you go to the internet, it'll tell you all sorts of stuff about salts, but none of it's true. But there does seem to be something about getting salt underneath the tongue that seems to reset something in the brain that says stop cramping. So the couple of things you need to do are you need to find salty liquids. So you could go get your sports drink off the course, and your goal is to swill it around your mouth and try to get it underneath your tongue. Or you could get a salt tablet and you could chew the salt tablet up and you could get that underneath your tongue. And you need to slow down and give your legs a neural break from what they're doing as well. If you get a cramp and you do that, you might be able to walk for 5 minutes, get the salty liquids in, and then 5 minutes later, you might be able to resume running. Okay, but you definitely want to, if you get signs of cramping, definitely start using those strategies early, because if you try to push through it, chances are it's not going to go well and it's just going to get worse in terms of what you're doing. Blisters, if you've changed your socks and done all those little things, you've mitigated the risk of all that stuff. A useful thing to do is to get the blister protection pads. And you can always, if you've got friends or family there, you can always give them, hop in their pocket. And in case you get a blister or something, you can always ask to grab it off them. Technically, it's outside assistance. But again, if you're coming 86 in your age group, I don't think anyone really cares. But that's a good idea to potentially do that. But I would say just by changing socks and having talcum powder, you're going to minimize the risks of those things happening. Getting tired is normal. Okay. None of you are doing the event because it's easy. You're all doing it because it's hard. All right. So when it does get hard, you have to embrace that and enjoy it. I remember the first time I did Ironman, and there was someone that I used to respect a lot, and I asked her for some advice, and she said, there'll be a point in the afternoon when you're going as hard as you can, and you can't go any harder. And she said, when you get to that point, you'll get what this event is about. And I thought, okay. And then I did Ironman, and I got to the point where the best I could do was shuffling like an old man with bits of walk break. And then I got it. Like I wasn't in control anymore of what I was doing. I was doing the best that I could do, which was trying to move forward. That's something that vaguely looked like shuffling. And so when you're at that point, just enjoy it, right? That's part of the event. I hope you all have fantastic days. But there is a point in the race where you just do what you can to get to the end line. And that's what the event's all about. So don't get stressed when that happens. Don't get anxious. Don't get upset. Just enjoy the fact that you're out there and you can participate in these events when you push your body that far as well. All right. Nutrition is another one. So the signs of your nutrition going wrong are usually that your stomach gets upset. So the big ones is burping, getting bloated. Those are the two biggest ones. So if you find that you start burping or you start feeling a bit bloated, your stomach's not processing the food and you need to slow it down. Okay. So if you're out there and you realize, oh, I'm burping or I'm feeling a bit gassy, you need to start drinking water and just letting your body process what's in your stomach before you start again. If you start getting signs like this, don't keep jamming calories down your throat because your stomach will shut off and you'll stop doing it. So just slow down what you're doing. The other signs that maybe your nutrition isn't going right is getting really cranky, right? So if you're out there and you suddenly realize that everyone passing on the bike is getting really irritated with them, chances are your blood sugar is getting pretty low. All right. So really common one is you go out there and you'll see someone on the bike snap at someone because they rode too close or something like that. I guarantee you their blood sugars are getting low and they're just cranky. So that's usually a sign that, hey, I need to go find some sugar or a can of Coke or something and pop myself back up. I'm out there. Again, cramps, which I addressed, and dehydration. But you guys should all be drinking enough to make sure that you stay hydrated across the day. You will finish the day dehydrated. That's normal. You just need to drink enough to get to the finish line when you're out there. Does anyone have any questions about all the stuff that might go wrong? No? But go through that list.
Dan, sorry.
Yep.
Have you ever done the two caps where you put the cap on, then the goggles, then the cap over to try and not lose your goggles?
I've never done that personally, but I mean, you could just put the goggles over and then one cap over as well. I've never double capped my head in terms of it, but you could do it if you're paranoid about it. I guess the only things I would say is I don't know how tight the cap gets on your head when you got two on there. When you got that on, it definitely probably keep your head a bit warmer. But I would say, look, put your goggles on and then just put the cap over the first set. I don't know what the second cap's going to do that the first one kind of didn't do.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Thanks.
Yep. But if you do lose a cap in the water, just keep swimming. So, I always mention this one, and the reason I say it is, I've coached a lot of people over the years, and I really like it when people are happy for what their body can do, right? So when you get to the finish line, never be annoyed or sad or disappointed or anything like that. People sometimes go, I didn't go as fast. I went slower than last night. You should realize that finishing these events is a massive privilege, right? You're one of the 1% of the population that can do these things. Most people can't do a 5K run, let alone what you guys are going to do in 2 weeks' time. So when you get to that red chute at the end, if you're not winning the event or about to try to cut, the 5-hour mark or 6-hour mark, take your time, smile, enjoy it when you get to go across the chute, because you never know how many times you get to do this. Don't take it for granted that you get to do it every single year or multiple times a year. If you got friends or family and this is your first time doing it, pre-organize where near the chute they're going to stand, because I guarantee you when you go down the chute, there's, noises and microphones, and it's really hard to spot friends and family, and you'll flat out just go straight past them. So if you've got friends and family there, just say, hey, stand there and I can come give you a sweaty hug. before I go across the finish line is always good as well. And then you will get lovely finish photos at some point. So, if you've had a hard day and you've got, half dried out, slobber hanging off your mouth, and, you've unzipped your top and half your chest is hanging out, maybe just try to freshen up a tiny bit before you go down the chute as well. So that can be as simple as a cup of water across the face and the chest and just zip it up. But if you've, one and done doing a half Ironman and your, special photo you've got at home is your nipple hanging out and, dribble down your face, it doesn't look as good. So, a tiny little bit of time to prepare before the finish line is always a good idea as well. Okay. I think that's the end of everything. Yeah, question time. So I've covered a heap of stuff in there. Hopefully it was all useful to everyone. But has anyone got any questions about any of the stuff that I covered or potentially didn't cover today?
Yeah, just with carrying like an extra tire or dealing with getting a flat tire on the bike, how should we prepare for that? Like, how should we carry it?
So definitely have a saddlebag that just has, I would always say if you've got a standard tire that's taking just a clincher tube in it, I would always say you should carry 2 spare tubes and you should carry 3 spare canisters in the back. That way you can deal with 2 flats, because sometimes, maybe it was a piece of glass and then you go to inflate that second one to replace it and you either stuff it up and pinch the tube, or maybe you didn't get the glass out properly and it cuts again. You have the option to do that. And then I would say take 3 canisters because they don't take up much space, but also just in case you accidentally, make your canister empty itself before it got into the tire as well. And then just make sure you know how to do it. So just practice changing your tire at least a couple of times before race day. Your odds of getting a flat are, realistically probably 1 in 200. So it's really, really low. There are like Shimano support vehicles or something floating around, but you might be waiting an hour or 2 to see one. So definitely don't count on them getting there in any sort of timely fashion. But that's probably the best thing to do. Outside of, these days, a lot of bikes have tubeless tire setups with sealant in them. I would definitely, if it's possible to do that sort of setup on your tires, I would encourage that, because then if you get a flat, it should in theory seal itself, and you shouldn't even probably know you got a flat on race day, and then you deal with it after the race.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And also just regarding like servicing for this week and next week, will you just be getting like general servicing or like more specific?
Yeah, just get a general service. So just get the bike checked over properly. Even if you've got a clean drive chain, freshly greased chain, and then just your gearing tuned up, it'll make a massive difference on race day. So, the amount of people that I see with disc wheels and fancy equipment, but their chain is dirty, I think, well, it'll go faster if you've got a clean chain. So it's definitely little things like that make a massive difference. But it's also good for a mechanic to check over and see where there's anything wrong with your bike that you're unaware of. And that could be something as simple as, look, your tires are old and they've got plenty of nicks and cuts in them, and they're not going to provide much puncture resistance. For a lot of you guys, the amount of training that you've done to get to this point, to not spend $100 on a new set of tires, to me seems silly. When you can always use your old tires later on when you're in training, but always have fresh stuff for race day to minimize your chance of a problem.
Cool, thank you.
Right. Any other questions?
Just one, it might be left to center. You mentioned about the blisters and, if you've got somebody in the crowd that can pass them to you. Does that also include other forms of nutrition? So let's say you're on, you've got dietary requirements. Can you arrange to have something put on the table for the run, or somebody to pass you?
I don't think so. Technically getting past stuff from outside assistance. So formally I didn't tell you that you can do that. But the thing is, I've known plenty of people that, their family might pass them Panadol or something because they've got a headache on the run. But if you've got family passing you something and you're coming, you spoke earlier about trying to beat the cutoff time.
Yeah, that's it.
So I don't think anyone's going to DQ you for doing your best to beat the cutoff time. If you're coming in the top 5 and you're trying to win some money out of this event, no. But if you're just trying to get through and family have passed you something, I don't think it's a big deal.
Okay, cool.
But the official answer is no. You can't have anyone pass you anything. That's outside assistance.
All right.
All right. Any other questions?
It was just a comment I wanted to make. I noticed the last year's Western Sydney, there was a first timers bell. So, yeah, if you're a first timer, ring it loud and proud.
Yeah.
And also remember, you can't bring your family in the finish chute. They will DQ you on that.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. Don't bring your kids across the line. You'll get in trouble. Yeah. The only rules are you can't crawl over the line, and you can't take your kids across either because they get in the way, apparently.
I thought the thing said you could crawl.
As far as I know, you're not allowed to crawl. You're allowed to walk. But I was
No, because it says in the because I've read it. Hang on, I actually read it again the other day.
Well, I hope none of you are crawling.
Walk, run, or crawl. Yep.
Okay, then you can crawl. I thought they made a ban on crawling. But yeah, hopefully none of you are in the state. If you're in the state where you need to crawl or something, I think something's gone wrong. So hopefully none of you get to that point.
I think we should all just do it now, just as a show.
Yeah, do it. Do it. Roll across, mate. If you do a roly-poly, I will give you a free hat. All right. Has anyone else got any questions? No? All right. So I might wrap it up there. I have recorded this, so I will send a video, a link to the video sometime in the next sort of 2 days to everyone. So you feel free to watch it again. You all will also have my email address as well. So if any of you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I will be out there on race day. So we will organise a spot to meet up on race morning. So if anyone's sort of nervous or any lazy last minute tips, I will be out there anyway. But otherwise, I wish you all well for the next last 2 weeks of your training. And then I'll see you all on race day.
Dan, just before you go,